Yeah, so we've certainly been exposed to, heard a bit about virtual reality applications, augmented reality applications, and increasingly we're hearing more about this thing called the metaverse.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, your thoughts. Is the metaverse something we should expect to see?
I think there is still quite a bit of a significant gap between the sort of dream and where the reality is. And the hardest part is how to bridge that gap, right? To give you an example, like if you have a headset, like an Oculus or HoloLens, right? You live in that headset and you can get the 3D experience. I would say without a lot of technology propensity, you will be able to get it, right? But the problem is the headset people are only always going to be a niche set to start with. And when we build these communication products, it's about reaching every corner of the world. And inherently, it's about making these technologies accessible to everybody, regardless of their whatever, right? Gender, financial situation, technology proficiency, and all that. So these are at odds, right? When you have new experiences that require people to have special equipment to enjoy versus the need for communication to reach every corner of society and bring equitable experience to everybody. Those are conflicting needs. But that's fun. That makes the problem fun, right? I think the biggest problem we need to solve is how do you reconcile those needs, right? How do you make people who have access to these cutting edge equipment and money to buy those can feel like they can still reach people who doesn't and who don't. And for people who don't and can't afford, can still feel like they can participate in this sort of metaverse cutting edge experience in a somewhat equal way, right? And doesn't feel like I'm being disadvantaged. I'm like just a spectator. I'm a second-class citizen. I think it's only when the industry solve those, how to connect, bridge the gap between these two. And then this will become, really a real thing beyond what's in the dream and in the vision.
Well, let's stay with that for a moment. You mentioned your research. I'd love to hear, and I'm sure the viewers would love to hear about some of the research that you've done in terms of what it's telling you about behaviors and maybe what it's suggesting to you in terms of technological developments that you might be able to put in place in the future.
At Microsoft, and I think, big in tech industry in general, we do have all sorts of research. We have research positions as well. The first example I came up with came to my mind was during a pandemic. We heard a lot around this notion about meeting fatigue, right? Because, people, you always have all kinds of meetings and, but this sense about fatigue becomes so overwhelming. There's lots of news articles around it and studies around it, and employee talk about it, student talk about it, because you're like in front of your screen 24/7, or if not 12 hours or 8 hours a day, all the time. And so we did some research around that. We did lots of research around that. And one of the interesting things we did was, my team actually worked with neuroscientist in Microsoft. We actually have neuroscientists in Microsoft as our researchers. They, we basically do these type of, we have a lab where we can invite people and we put sort of neuro sensors on their head to measure their brainwave, right? And then we would show them different UIs to see, how their brain responds to different UX paradigm. And in Microsoft Teams, we spearheaded an experience called Together Mode, which is basically, instead of putting everybody on a grid, we can take out extract the human from their background and then put just sort of your bust or your head into a contiguous background like a theater or like a beach, right? So we did that feature. It came from a hackathon project, and it was for fun, but there is a hypothesis that we had around, and there's backed by science in the past, where I think the human cognitive load becomes much stronger, much higher when you look at someone and then they have a lot of background behind them, because you constantly are trying to kind of stay focused on this person's body language and visual cues and all that, but there's lots of things in background that distracts you and requires your brain to do extra processing. So part of the hypothesis we had with Together Mode is by taking people out of their busy background and put them on a contiguous space that's pretty clean, it reduces that cognitive overload and it helps with fatigue as well. So we actually did the neuroscience research about it, basically put people in, and sort of do A/B testing to see, this kind of UI treatment versus that kind of UI treatment. It was pretty startling, like in a regular Teams, sort of meeting background or Zoom background where you have a grid, about 30 minutes into just staring at it, the brain wave starts to go red. There's a science metric that our scientists use to measure, but you can very distinctly tell red to green. But anyway, it starts to heat up, so you can see the brain starts to work extra hard after 30 minutes. So the product recommendation we had was, if you do meetings for video meetings for longer than X period of time, we should recommend you to take a break because your brain is going to get fatigued. But with Together Mode, we can see the clear difference, right? They can last a lot longer because the cognitive load was much light. So it's just one of those examples where it was interesting to use this kind of cross-field methodology, right? Computer technology, which is AI, user experience design, which is a lot about art, and then neuroscience, which is the hardcore of science, and put all these different fields together and being able to actually help shape how we think about our product.